Representation is important in government. When CCM goes to the Capitol to urge for help with school air quality and other issues, we are making sure municipalities have a voice. But at almost every level of government, we know that our communities of color are underrepresented. We know that discussions about the causes of this disparity are important, but so is action. We want to be a part of the change, and that is why we are holding Representation Matters for the second year in a row. Joining us today is Melvette Hill of the Parent Leadership Training Institute, an important partner for this two-day training, to talk about the work her organization does, as well as why representation matters. You can register for Representation Matters, held March 12th and 19th, at ccmcares.com. It is completely free to do so. We'd like to thank our premier sponsor at Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks. Check them out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or member municipal leaders. Melvette, thanks for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
So we asked you to come on today in large part because you're going to be participating again in our Representation Matters program. But before we get to talking about that, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Parent Leadership Training Institute. So can you explain for the people at home what your organization does?
Okay, so this is my life work, my heart, and I get so excited to have the opportunity to talk about it. So the Parent Leadership Training Institute, some know it as PLTI, is a 20-week course for parents in civics and personal leadership. Mm-hmm. It is a family civics initiative of the Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. And it was started back in 1992 by Elaine Zimmerman, who at the time was the executive director for the Connecticut Commission on Children. And as we know about our commissions, they are legislative agencies that staff our state legislature. So to have this type of civics initiative as part of our state legislative work is so exciting. PLTI is a place where parent leadership emerges from developed trust, lots of dialogue, skill building, hope, and high expectations. And we believe these are the ingredients that offer parents who seek to create change for children. That's the important thing, creating change for children and others who are the beneficiaries, right? We see this as a ladder toward leadership.
So in large part, it sounds like you're giving people the tools to succeed is kind of the...
Yes, we are. We're giving them the tools to succeed. So it starts with personal leadership, understanding self, mm-hmm. family, and community. And that's the first 10 weeks. We call it phase one. Mm-hmm. Phase two goes into building a democracy toolkit, right? So it's understanding how things work in local and state government, how to collaborate, how to engage in productive ways so that you can create change. And then what's really wonderful about this, there's a give back. There is a civic project, a community project that each parent leader completes, and they do a community project report. It all happens within those 20 weeks, although some of those projects extend past their time in the classroom. So that is probably one of the key elements and also a linchpin for parent leaders as they continue learning over the 20 weeks, but then they start to engage publicly, in many cases in democratic practice. And that project is the thing that helps continue to hold things together for them as they learn and grow.
And is your organization Connecticut-based, or are there things like this throughout the country?
Well, it is Connecticut-based. It started in Connecticut. It's been 30 years, if you can imagine. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. It is owned by the state of Connecticut and sits in our commission as part of our legislature. But we have PLTI communities all throughout the country. We have 69 communities across the United States, and also one city in Australia that actually hosts PLTI. They do that, though, through what we call our national replication arm, and that's the National Parent Leadership Institute. So they have been given permission to license PLTI outside of the state of Connecticut. So I lead the charge here in Connecticut, and then our partners at MPLI lead it across the country and in Australia.
So it started here, but now it's been exported because of success to across the world, pretty much.
Yes, absolutely.
That's pretty wild.
And when I say states, I also want to be clear that it's not just in states as we know them, but also in sovereign nations. So we work with the Wind River Indian Reservation, as well as White Lake and Red Earth sovereign nations. And so we are trying to ensure that everyone has access to learning the skills of democracy and engaging in government.
And why do you think it's important that parents and grandparents learn the skills of democracy stuff? Why is that important?
Well, it's important because everyone should be able to, everyone who lives here as a resident in this country should be able to engage. Representation is important. And, when Elaine Zimmerman started PLTI many years ago, almost 30 years ago, she did focus groups around the state for 2 years, and she gathered stakeholders to learn what needed to be done in order for change to happen, in order for substantial long-term change to happen for children. And she focused on rural, suburban environments, as well as other parts of the state, right? So all the corners of the state. And she invited like the typical stakeholders, right? Leaders in education, local government, and business, but she also included non-traditional stakeholders, right? People like the fire chief, the school custodian, the children's librarian, and of course, parents. And she put all the supports in place to ensure that everyone was able to participate, right? So she got a convenient location, she provided transportation, a family meal, and also on-site childcare, like quality, right? I'm going somewhere with this, is all these elements are really important. And what she found was that regardless of the location, the best and most substantial suggestions and ideas came from the parents. And some of those might have been grandparents too. Yet there was this universal response she kept hearing, right? As parents engaged in these conversations and offered their good ideas and suggestions, they would like push themselves away from the table and kind of throw their hands up and say, but I'm just a parent. Who's going to listen to me? And it became this constant refrain that she heard over and over again. This is why. Because parents and grandparents think that no one will listen to them, but they are the ones who have the lived experience and lived expertise at knowing children, knowing the needs of families, and so that's why even PLTI is a 2-generational approach. We don't just have this wonderful curriculum for parents, we also have it for children. It's a parallel curriculum. And so the reason why it's important for parents and grandparents and caregivers and people who love children to engage in leadership training is so that they can be the change agent. They are the best people. They are people on the ground who are experiencing this every day. And so they're the constituents. They need to know how to make change happen. Parents and grandparents and people who have adopted children, who have children who are birthed in their heart. We can talk about all the people who have guardianship of children. They want the best for children. And in many cases, they are seen as troublemakers. They are seen as people who are volatile because they're standing up for the rights of children. They're standing up for these children. And so they need these added supports so that they can have their voices heard, so that they can be productive change agents, and so that their legislators and elected officials will listen, right? In a way that creates change and collaboration.
Yeah, and for some of the people that might be the ones that would stand up and be troublemakers, as it were, teaching them how to use the system the right way to get that change, to put that energy and passion that they have for helping out the kids into the right avenues to actually affect that change.
Yeah, and I think we've seen some not so good examples in the past year or two of parents who are passionate about different issues that are happening right now during the pandemic. And it's almost like what not to do. This is what you don't do, right? Fighting, yelling, things like that we're seeing. Whether parents' opinions are, the right or wrong or whatever side you sit on.
Yeah.
Everyone wants the best for children, but there's a right way to do things. And this is what we do at PLTI.
Yeah, and some of the ways they're disruptive, they're not just disruptive, but they're also ineffective for the people that want to make the change. Even if you want to make that change, there's more effective ways to go about it. Who should take this training? Should all parents? Should only parents that are feeling really active? Can you benefit from this, just the knowledge, even if you don't necessarily immediately go out and become very active in things?
Right. So everyone, anyone should take it. We have, the demographics of PLTI are so diverse, and there's an application process. It's not a sign-up process, right? So there's an application process, and in selecting our parents, there's an interview. But we take into account many different things, and it has nothing to do with educational level. So let me just say that there. We have parents who might have a high school diploma, might have a GED. We also have those who might have a PhD, and everything in between. So it is not that is not a disqualifier, your education level. We have a diverse group of parents across race, religion, culture, background, a country of origin. And so, even we have parents who might not be citizens of this country. So we ask everyone to participate so that they can engage in our democracy. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen to do that, right? But there are many people who are living here and want the best for their children. So I would say if there are parents who want to learn how things work, how local and state government works, or even how school systems work or different systems work, they should attend PLTI. If they want to create change, if there's something that they know needs to be changed and they don't know how to do it, they should attend PLTI. If they want to build relationships, if they want to build skills, they should attend PLTI. So I would say that that's most people. We invite most people to apply.
You mentioned before that you do some work with kids, and that you've been around for 30 years. At this point, do you have any second generation participants where their parents were involved and now they're involved?
Well, we have some child leaders who I don't think that we've had any child leaders cycle through to PLTI, but we do have some of our child leaders who took it many years ago who are now engaged in the work of PLTI. So they might be a CLTI teacher. We have a few of those. I'm thinking of one right now, Mackenzie Mahoney out of Naugatuck, who was a CLTI student, and now she actually is a CLTI teacher. Yeah. We also see that many of our CLTI leaders are going on and continuing work. Like we have one, Miriam Aziz out of Danbury, Connecticut. She went to that PLTI. I believe she lives in Newtown now. But she wrote a children's book. Soulful Sydney explores diversity, right? And so our child leaders are change agents as well, and we're seeing them continuing to do the work and inspire other students to do the work as well.
So you say on your website that the course benefits parents and children, but also it benefits communities when parents use their tools of democracy and civic initiatives. How does learning about the issues around education and children improve and translate into civic mindedness?
One of the things that happens within PLTI is that the parent leaders who are in each cohort within their own communities create a community, a small community itself. And they learn to listen from to each other, right? So there's active listening involved, hearing from people's backgrounds and experiences, and also thoughts. Some of those are differing thoughts. And they're able to take their learning and the practice that they have within a PLTI safe environment and engage in things like Board of Education meetings or city council meetings. And so I would say they're giving the skills and the tools and also the bravery to go out there and start, maybe in some small ways, understanding what's happening in their community, understanding zoning, and maybe they'll go to a zoning commission meeting. These small steps toward engaging in their community or their city lead to larger steps, right? Once I understand how things work, once I understand zoning laws and why they can't, people can't build a house that's made for 5 families here on this street, maybe that's something I want to change, right? So smaller changes, also engaging in Board of Education meetings and even testifying, right? So maybe during community comment or testifying at the legislature. And what's so exciting is when we hear about parents running for office. So we have a number of PLTI parents who have run for office across the state and actually won. And it's in all kinds of aspects, whether it's a school board, city council, you name it, they've done it. We also have 2 PLTI graduates, actually 3 now, who are legislators. So it easily translates this learning and this work prepares them in a way where they now have the confidence to engage and do something about the change they want to see happen.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM. That's kind of a good segue, talking about people being elected into office, into Representation Matters, the program that we're doing, our 2 organizations are doing together. And the ultimate goal is helping people run for office or maybe join a board or commission. Why do you think that civic engagement, public service is important in society? You know, you're a government employee yourself. Why should people choose the public sector?
You know, I think it's a personal decision. I first have to say I am a state employee, but I would never run for office, right? I think that there are people who are built for that. And there are also people who are built for behind the scenes. Believe it or not, I'm more of a behind the scenes person. I want to help out that way. But I think the whole idea about representation is important, and that we have leaders who represent our communities. When little boys and little girls look up and they say, I want to run for president, what does that mean? And do they really believe that they can win and that someone would accept them? I think with the election of President Barack Obama, people of color, little boys, little girls, even adult men and women were inspired because they saw a person with the skin color similar to their own that was voted as president. Similarly, we see mayors and legislators, and we look and say, can I do that? Can I be that person also? And when we see those people, whether they reflect our values, our cultural backgrounds, our identities, we're more encouraged when we see people like us. And I think that causes people to want to be able to do that as well, because it seems possible, it's doable, it's attainable. So this idea about representation goes really deep, far and wide.
Talk about why, it might be interesting for the individuals to do this, to see someone to be represented, but why is it important for the communities to have representation from people from all colors, genders? Why is it important to everybody at the table?
So it reminds me of a quote from the book, and I'll read it, from the book, The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. And it's, the title book is The Sum of Us, What Racism Costs Everyone and How We Can Prosper Together. It's by Heather McGhee. And one of her quotes there, and I underlined this because I keep coming back to it, and she talks about the urgency for her to shift from the nonprofit that she was working at and get into more of the fight of creating change in a more productive way. She's an economist. And she said, part of my sense of urgency about the work was that my people, Black people, are disproportionately ill-served by bad economic policy decisions. I was going to help make better ones. I came to view the relationship between race and inequality as most people in my field do, linearly, like in a linear way. Structural racism accelerates inequality for communities of color. When our government made bad economic decisions for everyone, the results were even worse for people already saddled with discrimination and disadvantage. And so I believe this is the case across every city and state in America, where we have these these structures that were created to benefit some of the population, right, and not all. And when bad decisions are made for the majority of people, and only a small minority of the people benefit, that's a problem. And so we have to have people in office, in public office, who are looking for equality, right? And looking to kind of break up some of these inequities that we see happening in our society as it relates to public health, as it relates to housing, as it relates to a number of different things, education. And so we need people who understand the struggle. We need people who understand the things that are important to their constituents, right? And that's different, right? That's different in every community, and even within communities, there are differences, right? But we know that disproportionately, right, there are not a lot of legislators of color. There are not a lot of elected officials of color. So we need more of that so that we can get to some of the root causes and start pulling those things up, and casting a light on them so that we really can start chopping down and rebuilding, systems that work for everyone, right? Because right now that's not happening. And we do have some great legislators, definitely in our Black and Puerto Rican caucus, and we have others who are allies in it, right? It's not just about people of color, but it's about all of us working together. But I think that's why representation matters, right? That's why it's important to have representation for diverse groups with diverse values so that people can get what they need in order to be successful.
As of a 2020 report from the Secretary of State's office, we know that these disparities still persist, 2 decades into the 21st century here. But some things are slowly getting better. Why do you think these changes occur slowly? What are some of the barriers to public life?
Well, some of the barriers are people's beliefs, right? So people have their own belief systems, and those beliefs serve their purpose, right? So whatever they're doing, they are tapping into their core beliefs, whatever they were taught, whatever they were brought up with, whatever they're seeing. And so it is hard to change. In order to change society, in order to change systems, you have to change the culture, and the culture is tied to people's beliefs, right? And so in the work that we do through PLTI, we really help people examine how they arrived at what they believe, right? We talk about thoughts become messages, messages become beliefs, and beliefs become action.
Yeah.
And so I believe that's the crux of it.
Very cool. A big part of representation matters is to open doors for people, or at least to give them the keys so they can open the doors for themselves. But it can be difficult for people to put themselves out there. As the leader of a training institute, do you see some people that just have what it takes, or can it be learned?
I believe it's both. I believe it's both. And there are people who were born to do this. There were people who that was their intended purpose on this planet. I do believe that. I believe that there are others who have to work harder to do things, but they can do it. I don't think it is beyond anyone. If it's something that's important to you, if running for public office is important to you, you have the right supports, the right team, the right access and opportunity, you can do it.
It might come easier to some, but anyone can do this.
I believe it. I do believe it. And I think if we look at some of our elected officials, we might agree. We might be able to say, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Considering some people who've been elected over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Definitely.
Last year, PLTI was a sponsor of the Representation Matters event, and you moderated our panel of experts. It was one of the most popular pieces of the whole agenda. What do you think made that panel resonate with guests?
I believe what made it resonate with guests was because they were just being honest, open and honest, and I think that people like that. Transparency is important. Also, integrity is important, and they weren't holding back. They were just speaking truth. They were speaking to their experience, and they were encouraging people to the extent that you can do this too. So I think that's why that panel was popular. And there was a great camaraderie amongst the panelists. So I think that also was able, people were able to engage, and they were, responding in the chat and answering questions. So I think that's why that panel was so popular.
Yeah. Speaking of that popular, we had a really great panel put together. How did you feel speaking with these individuals and hearing them share their personal journeys through public service?
I learned so much. It's an honor to speak with them, and they're so delightful and kind. I believe they're down to earth people, but they take their responsibility very seriously. And so hearing their stories is inspiring, and it also encourages me to take to hold what I do in that same sacred way as a responsibility, not only just to serve people, but also to serve my family, to serve my community, and to serve myself. There's a service to self that's important in this, right? What am I doing for myself so that I can continue to learn and grow and to be the best person that I can be as I engage in democratic practice, right? And so it's always a checking. And so I learned that actually in listening to them even more.
Yeah. I know after I do something like that, I always kind of look back and think about how it went. Is there anything that you wish you had asked last year?
No, I don't think there was anything that I would double back on. I was able to ask a good amount of questions. And they just went with it. And sometimes it's better not to ask a bunch of questions and just let them talk, right? Because they springboarded off of each other, and it was a beautiful discussion. So I don't have any regrets. I think all the questions I needed to ask were asked.
Excellent. So you get the chance to do it again this year.
Yes.
You'll be moderating our panel again. A little bit different this year because we're going to have state officials on the panel this year, because that's kind of the focus in this year being, the election cycles. We're focusing on state office for this one. How are you going to prepare for this panel?
Well, very interesting. So I look at, I think what I'm doing right now is looking at some common issues that are existing in our state as juxtaposed as they exist in the rest of the country, as well as some of, I would say, the hot topics. That as we just started legislative session, there are things, and it's a short session, but there are things that are bubbling up as important topics. And I'm curious to see how much they all agree on what's important right now. Yeah. So I'm doing my research on that right now to prepare.
What do you hope for individuals who graduate from either PLTI or Representation Matters? What do you hope they get out of this?
For PLTI, we have great outcomes. 61% of our parents, after they leave PLTI, are more likely to reach out to an elected official to solve a problem, right? Their knowledge of government and systems, right? When we're talking about agencies and how systems work, that increases like by 45%. Yeah. And they work together on local initiatives, right, within their community. That's probably about almost 30% of the people. And their community activism increases about 25%. So when people graduate PLTI, I think there are two big things I hope for them: that they stay connected to their PLTI community, right? We have a national alumni group that has a lot of support, as well as strength in number and voice. And so my goal is for them to stay connected so that they can be involved in issues as they see fit. And then the other thing is, what I hope for them is that what they've learned helps transform them personally, right? That there's a personal transformation. And when we look at this personal leadership and civic engagement, sometimes people tend to look at bigger things, right? Like, this person's going to run for office, and those things are great. But even change within a person's home and the way they live their life is equally as important, right? Those outcomes are equally as important. So that's what I would want for PLTI graduates. For people who go through our Representation Matter, who joined us for those 2 days, I would hope they'd be encouraged to either support someone's campaign or to run for office, right? And at the minimum, understand better the process, right? And maybe it's not for them, it's not for everyone, but understand the process and understand all the inner workings so that they can make a better decision about, am I going to run for office, or maybe I'm going to support someone or encourage someone else.
Yeah, I think that's important. What you just said is, if someone's listening and they think, oh, I don't want to run for office, that's a little too scary for me. But they could also use those skills to help someone else run for office and support a campaign for someone that they agree with. So there's a
Absolutely.
lot of different ways for people to do this and participate in the process. So as we mentioned before, looking at data from the last 20 years or so, Connecticut is not only getting more diverse, but our government is getting more diverse as well, slowly. Do you see a point in the future where something like representation matters won't exist anymore, where we won't need it? What do you think it will take to make that happen?
So I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. I think that is a long distant future realization. And I think that we need more of this. We need more of people feeling empowered, feeling that they can do it, feeling supported, and that they really can be the ones to make the change happen. So there's a lot of undergirding that needs to happen. There's a lot of exposure. There's more access. There's more opportunity that's going to be required before we won't need this anymore.
I guess kind of a final question here. If someone is watching this interview and they're thinking about participating in representation matters, what would you say to them? What do you think is important for them to know?
I think it's important for them to know that it's an investment in time, and many people invest their time in different ways. People invested their time yesterday watching the Super Bowl for hours and for entertainment. There are people who invest their time in going to school. There are people who invest their time in sports and all types of activities. This is an investment in time that's going to pay dividends back. What you will learn, what you will experience, what you will hear is richness. It is so rich that you will walk away with almost a bag full of money, but it's not real money, right? It is something that you can use for your future, right? You are in a position that other people might not have this opportunity, right? But it's free. So whoever shows up, we're glad to have you. Register ahead of time. But I think that you don't want to miss this opportunity. This is the second time that we're doing it. People last time said it was great. It was phenomenal. They're coming back and they're bringing others with them. But it's an investment in time. And this is something that you want to invest in. You want to invest in yourself, you want to invest in your community, in your family. And this is one way to do it.
There's a lot of ways you could spend those 2 Saturdays, but this is one that could really continue to pay benefits into the future.
Yes, this could change a game for people.
Awesome. Well, Melvette Hill, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great being here.
And we look forward to seeing you moderate Representation Matters, March 12th and 19th.
Thanks.
We'd like to thank our guest, Melvette Hill. I'd like to thank our premier sponsors, Digital Back Office Palo Alto Networks, who you can check out at digitalbackoffice.com and paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.